Nasılsınız?
Aleykümselam abi. Abi başlıyoruz. Mute edebilirsiniz.
Tamam.
YouTube'a şey verecekmiş Bahadır abi. Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. Welcome to our HALAQA program. Today we are going to be with the Imam Abu QADIR AL-AMIN in San Francisco. And Imam Abu QADIR AL-AMIN is with the 20-year program in administration, substance abuse counseling, and program development for the San Francisco area and Muslim community. And he finished the College of Marine Communication and Business and San Francisco State and Berkeley and drug and alcohol studies. He got ijazah from Imam Warisuddin Muhammad since 1981. And he is supporting many community activities, social justice, and drug abuse programs. And he is the religious leader on the Islamic worship services and offers Islamic studies, including basic teachings, beliefs, and Arabic and Quran and the life of Prophet Muhammad. And Alhamdulillah, Allah gave me opportunity to be with him in Turkey together years ago. And especially under the light of current conditions, we do have a struggle for the justice and race relations. And Imam Warisuddin Muhammad community in here for a long time, and they do have lots of experience, ideas, and solutions. We would like to listen Imam Abu QADIR. Imam Abu QADIR, welcome. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam, Harun. It's a pleasure to be on the program with you. I would like to begin, as it is customary for Muslims to begin, when we're addressing important matters, we ask Allah for his guidance. So we would like to begin with the recitation of Surah Al-Fatiha. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Malik yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdina as-siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladhina an'amta alayhim. Ghayril maghdubi alayhim waladdallin. Ameen. We seek refuge with Allah against Satan, the rejected, with Allah's name, the merciful benefactor, the merciful redeemer. Praise is for Allah, the guardian, evolver, sustainer, and cherisher of all the worlds, the merciful benefactor, the merciful redeemer, master of the day of judgment. You alone do we worship, and your aid we seek. Show us the straight way, the way of those on whom you have bestowed your favors, those whose portion is not wrath, and who go not astray. Dear listeners, viewers, we're grateful to have this opportunity to address the contributions of Imam W. DEEN Muhammad. Some of you know him as Wallace D. Muhammad, the son of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, who became the leader of the African-American Muslim community, known as the Nation of Islam in 1975, upon the passing of his father. His father passed away on February the 25th of 1975. And that was one day before we had our annual convention called Savior's Day. So on the very next day, the Muslims from all over the United States had assembled to Chicago for our annual Savior's Day event. And the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was in poor health at that particular time. And by Allah's will, or by Allah's permission, he had it coincide with all of us assembling there at that particular time. So there was no time for a lot of confusion regarding who would become the next leader of that organization. So one day after one leader passed, the very next day we had all of our leaders from around the country, as well as many of the Muslim public, assembled at the convention center there in Chicago. And Imam W. DEEN Muhammad stepped onto the scene. Though he was on the scene prior to that, many people who were members of the community always looked to Imam W.D. Muhammad, Minister Wallace at that time, for a special leadership, because the teacher of Mr. Elijah Muhammad, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, had prepared us, told us that his teacher told him that this son, if it was a boy, to name him after him. His name was Wallace D. Farad, or Wallace Farad. And he named him after his teacher, Wallace D. Muhammad. And we expected that he would be, and he was told that he would be a helper to his father. Malcolm X, while he was on pilgrimage, he wrote 2 letters, one to his sister and one to Wallace D. Muhammad. And he said the hope for Islam in America would be a better understanding of Orthodox Islam. This was what Imam W.D. Muhammad had shared with Malcolm. He said, what do you think will help the future of Islam in America? He said a better understanding of Orthodox Islam. Not that Orthodox Islam was the answer, but a better understanding of it would be a great assistance and help to us in our struggle. So Imam W.D. Muhammad, he was different. He was prepared differently than many of the ministers in the Nation of Islam. As a matter of fact, his father prepared him. I remember being taught that his father wrote him a letter in 1946 while he was in prison for draft evasion, though he was 45 years old when he went to prison, way beyond the age of draft for the military service. He wrote his son a letter from Surah Luqman, chapter 31 of the Holy Quran, verse 13. And he said, behold, Luqman said to his son by way of instruction, O my son, join not in worship others with Allah, for false worship is indeed the highest wrongdoing. And it went on to say, and we have enjoined on you to be good to your parents. In travel upon travail did his mother bear him, and in years twain was his weaning. Hear the command, show gratitude to me and to your parents. To me is the final goal. But if they strive to make you join and worship with me, things of which you have no knowledge, obey them not, yet bear them company in this life, with justice and consideration, and follow the way of those who turn to me in love. In the end, the return of you all is to me, and I will tell you the truth and meaning of all that you did. So Imam W.D. Muhammad, in his 33 years of leadership from 1975 to 2008, when he passed away, radiallahu anhu, may Allah be pleased with him, he initiated many progressive steps for us to transform ourselves while taking responsibility for learning the language of the Holy Quran, learning knowledge about Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, learning about the environment that we live in, the government structure that we were under. So he established committees for us, while simultaneously while teaching us the proper way to worship, teaching us prayers, preparing leaders to be imams and to learn Arabic and to be able to lead the prayers and conduct nikah services, marriage ceremonies, to perform the janazah prayers, to provide Islamic counseling, all of these things. He traveled around the country practically every week. He was in a different city, educating and training and teaching and helping the Muslim community evolve from a pseudo-Islamic community with the name Islam, but without the content, without the behavior and the character of Islam based in the Quran. Though we had many semblances of Islam when we were calling ourselves Muslims in the Nation of Islam, people were not all same. There was a great diversity of knowledge within the body that he inherited, but none of us had the breadth and knowledge that Imam W.D. Muhammad had. He had a love for the Quran. He had a love for Muhammad, the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he had a love for his family and his community, and that is us, all of us. So he insisted that we accept responsibility to manage our affairs as Muslims. That is, not to depend on other people to think for us and to explain to us what is Islam. Myself as an imam under his leadership, I had to take responsibility to read more, to study certain books, and also to try to qualify myself to represent the faith of al-Islam. So Imam W.D. Muhammad was very successful in bringing us from pseudo-Islam in the Nation of Islam to thousands and millions of people coming from symbolic Islam into the language and the life behavior of Islam proper, as we say. We follow Quran, we follow Muhammad the Prophet, and we accept adult responsibility for our communities. He encouraged us to open mosques, which we did and are still doing, masajid throughout, and we're building mosques under his leadership. Of course, they're under the leadership of Muhammad the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but thinking with our own authentic mind in this environment as Muslims who happen to also be African Americans who descended from the enslaved populations that were dragged from the shores of Africa. So we also had those special conditions that we have to address. So we had to address the effects of slavery on us. We had to address skillfully, Imam W.D. Muhammad addressed the impact of white supremacy on our communities and Jim Crow, and giving us second-class citizenship, and how they miseducated us and made us hate our own identity. Imam W.D. Muhammad was very strategic in getting us to address those concerns. So there was a period when Imam W.D. Muhammad was transitional in the language that he used. At one point, he had us adopt as an identity the term Bilali, which addressed both our ethnic problem, because we had a problem as an ethnic group of how do we identify ourselves. At one point, we were called Negroes. Then at another point, we were called so-called Negroes. Then another part in our history and development, we were called Afro-Americans. Then there was also a period where we would go back and forth between Afro-American and Black. We would also go between Black and African-American. So Imam W.D. Muhammad said, well, let me make my contribution. We should also consider and call ourselves Bilalian. He said Bilal was an ethnic hero for us. Bilal ibn Rabah was an ex-slave who became a Muslim in the time of Muhammad the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was liberated from his slavery, and he became the muezzin and also the keeper of the treasure. He was also over the Beit al-Mal. He was over the wealth that was collected, the taxes that were collected as zakat and sadaqah. He was also in charge of that. So Imam W.D. Muhammad said that parallels our life. We were Africans who were enslaved. We've gained our freedom, and part of that freedom is also our embracing al-Islam. So on my children's birth certificates, my children were born in 1980, 1982, 1984, 1986. When we mark our ethnicity on their birth certificates, we mark Bilali, because we identify with that great hero in our life, Bilal ibn Rabah. So that was one contribution that was a very significant contribution. And also, not only was it embraced by people within his organization and the community, it was embraced by Christians, some Christians. I remember a prominent Christian minister by the name of T.L. Barrett. I remember him being on the front page of the newspaper saying, "Call me Bilalian." And he changed his name. His name was T.L. Barrett. He changed his name to Taman al-Bilali. He also recognized the value in us reconnecting our ethnic identity with the continent and the culture from which we had come. Another great contribution that Imam W.D. Muhammad made was for us to accept, to compete, to influence the American society with our values, with our beliefs, with our culture, with our food, with our dress, with our educational institution. He challenged us to compete, to influence the environment, not only with the symbolic call to prayer 5 times a day, but also with influencing the environment with our names on Muslim businesses. So he encouraged us to get into the halal meat business and to open halal stores and to provide goods and services in the neighborhood. At one point, under his leadership, we had secured a very large contract with a business that we had called American Pouch Foods, where we had a $30 million a year contract providing goods to the armed forces. In addition to that, Imam W.D. Muhammad encouraged us to become engaged civically as citizens. He invited mayors to the mosque. This is prior to some organizations that are involved in those type of activities now. He did that when it was done out of expediency. I remember Imam W.D. Muhammad picking up the American flag. He said, if you won't carry it, I'll carry it. And he proclaimed we need a new world patriotism. And he proclaimed that we wanted new values that were moral, that were decent, that respected fairness and justice. And he picked up the flag and participated in a public display of Islam's values being expressed in the American public. And he also encouraged many of us to go back to school and seek higher education. He established the American Muslim Teachers College under his leadership. We purchased a 20-acre college in Sedalia, North Carolina, that was particularly housed for purpose of educating our teachers in our school system. At that time, we had Claire Muhammad school system that was formerly called the University of Islam. It was both an elementary school as well as middle school and high school. Some cities had primary schools. Some people had schools that went up to the 8th grade. And in some cities, we were fortunate enough to have also high schools. And in some cases, we had beginnings of junior high school. But in Sedalia, we had a 20-acre campus called the Sedalia, the American Muslim Teachers College. As a matter of fact, I received 4 units of administrative credit from that institution. Imam W.D. Muhammad also, under his leadership, he established genuine interfaith dialogue between Christians and Jews when it was very unpopular. He was a trendsetter. He was a forerunner. He did these things when it wasn't done out of expedience. It was done before 9/11 had occurred, when many Muslims started putting flags in their homes and putting American flags on their lapels and started talking about how they valued their American citizenship. Imam W.D. Muhammad did that when it was coming from a genuine place, and he was encouraging us, that is his constituents, his supporters, his students and his followers, to embrace fully our American responsibility. So it was under his leadership that the first American Muslim chaplain in the United States Army was established. Imam, who was in the military, who was a follower of Imam W.D. Muhammad, was the first chaplain in the United States Armed Forces who was a Muslim. Under his leadership, the first deputy mayor of a large American City. Judge Adam Shakur in Detroit, Michigan, was the deputy mayor of the city. Also, under his leadership, there was an individual in Kuntz, Texas, who became the mayor of Kuntz, Texas. His last name was Bilal. And throughout the country, Muslims have began to serve in elected offices. We had judges in Ohio, judges in Maryland, Baltimore, Maryland. I'm talking about not only Superior Court judges, but also state judges on the state level. And then under his leadership, Judge David Shaheed was a judge. He was elected right after 9/11. He is already in office. Some people advised him not to mention his religion because it might hurt his campaign. However, his religious values and principles enabled him to win again a second and a third election because many of the values that we share as Muslims are also compatible with the sober-minded, right-thinking American public. Imam W.D. Muhammad also encouraged international trade and was involved in importing goods from a variety of countries around the world, including Turkey, China, Mexico, some parts of Africa. He was importing goods from West Africa that supported businesses around the United States. Some of them were clothing, some were electronics, some were skincare products, as well as jewelry, clothing manufacturing in Africa, in China, in Thailand. So Imam W.D. Muhammad was a visionary leader, and he trusted his constituents to make their contributions toward improving our life. Now, the thing that I haven't spoke about much, which is even more significant than all of the things that I've mentioned, is Imam W.D. Muhammad's insight into scripture. Insight into not only the scriptures of the Quran, but also the Bible, the Torah, and some of the other faiths that we recognize their influence on the world population. Imam W.D. Muhammad served as a member of the international religious community representing peace, and I forget the name of it, World Conference for Peace. He served as an international president on that organization. He served on Rabita al-Islami. He was the chairperson for all of the Muslims in America. When Pope John Paul had a special meeting that he convened along with the Focolare movement, Imam W.D. Muhammad addressed over 2 million people, Vatican and Rome. Out of all of the Muslims in the world, Imam W.D. Muhammad, because of his bridge building and his wise counsel, he was selected to represent all of us at that event. Imam W.D. Muhammad was a strong family man. He encouraged us to improve and strengthen our family infrastructure. He emphasized the need for us to have higher education. I believe we have more people who gain doctorate degrees and master's degrees and bachelors of science and other degrees under his leadership than any other organization that I'm aware of. And Imam W.D. Muhammad also was responsible for many African-American Muslims to seek higher education Islamically. And study overseas was a prominent part of what he encouraged us to do. Some went to Sudan and studied, some went to Morocco and studied, some went to Saudi Arabia and studied, some went to West Africa and studied, East Africa, because Imam Muhammad valued the importance of us being qualified to lead the Muslim community and to have knowledge on an equal with what other Muslim leaders have all around the planet. Imam Muhammad participated in conferences that took place in Saudi Arabia during the Gulf War, and I believe it was over 900 or 2,000 people who had been dispatched to the Gulf War who were in the military who made Shahada under the influence of Imam W.D. Muhammad during that period. And again, some say Imam W.D. Muhammad led the largest conversion of Muslims in mass in modern history. When he became the leader of his father's organization, we were claiming to be Muslims, but none of us had really formally taken our Shahada. We had written a letter, which is a part of the process that we had to go through in order to become a part of what was then the Nation of Islam. And in part, learning how to write that letter was also a strategy intended to evolve the level of literacy within that particular population. Bear in mind that also there was a period of time when education was forbidden to African Americans. And though it wasn't forbidden in the 30s, it was still discouraged. Though it wasn't forbidden in the 50s, people were still being discouraged. As you remember, or you may remember, or you may know this, or you may not, Malcolm X, when he was in school, and he expressed to his counselor that he was interested in becoming a lawyer. And the person discouraged him. He told him, "Oh, Malcolm, that's not something that you would be able to do. Why don't you think of something practical, like working with your hands? Maybe be a carpenter or something like that." So he discouraged him. And I remember once having an experience. I was in a grocery store one evening, and a gentleman had on a nice suit, and we were standing in line waiting to pay for our goods, and I was having light conversation with him, and I asked him, "What's your profession? You look like you're a lawyer or something." I was complimenting him, and he bowed his head slightly as though he was embarrassed, and he said, "I work with my hands." I said, that's honorable. And you take care of your family, huh? And he started smiling. I said, "Did you know that a surgeon works with his hands?" You know, surgeons work with their hands. It's the brain and the hand working together. So it takes intelligence to work with your hands, and you have to have a degree of dexterity and coordination, as well as intelligence to fulfill any of those kind of functions. So that gentleman left there. He said, I appreciate you sharing that with me. I'm gonna share that with my family when I get home." And he felt better about himself. So that was one of the other dimensions of Islam under Imam W.D. Muhammad's leadership and his father. It instilled in us of a value system of ourself. Our self-worth increased, and we began to value ourselves as human beings. Whereas in this dark and divisive environment, heavily influenced by white supremacy, where Black was looked and disregarded and considered inferior. We were at one point considered 3/5 of a human being. Black was considered ugly. And Imam W.D. Muhammad began to treat those conditions, as did his father, with knowledge from the Quran, and also with the spiritual disciplines of Islam that began to create a new spirit in us. Knowledge began to give us increased confidence and spirit for reforming ourselves and also reforming other human beings. As it was mentioned when Brother Haroon was reading my CV, I worked in drug and alcohol treatment for years. And Islam gives us guidance on how we can treat those conditions. One place in the Quran, it says the human beings seek to accept his desires as a ilah, as a god. That's what happens when people use drugs and they can't seem to shake them because they become under the influence of their desires. And their desires can overpower them, and they'll be as dedicated to heroin or alcohol or methamphetamines or marijuana or hashish, as dedicated as a person would be to worshiping their God, because that's how God has constructed the human being. He has designed us a certain way, and if you give yourself to those influences, then they can cripple. But the disciplines of Islam, Imam Deeen Muhammad said, fasting in Islam gives us the strength to break those type of habits, and it puts us in charge. We, inshallah, gain victory over our lower self when we follow these Islamic disciplines. So Imam Deeen Muhammad was a great teacher. He taught and influenced governments, not just the American government, world governments. He's been invited to Switzerland to address world affairs and world leaders. He was appointed at one point to serve on Madeleine Albright's Human Rights Commission as a commissioner under the State Department. And Imam Deeen Muhammad opened the way for Muslims to earn professional jobs in prisons and hospitals and medical facilities throughout the United States of America. Chaplaincies have been established in California, Washington State, New York State, Texas Department of Corrections, and the guidance that was emanated from Imam Deeen Muhammad opened the way for Muslims to acquire these positions, to service the Muslim populations in those institutions in those states. So that's something that should be to its credit. And what he worked on was reforming the lives of the inmates with the message of the Al-Islam and with the Quran. And many of the chaplains who have served in those positions also took their job very seriously. They encouraged the prisoners, the inmates, to seek higher education, to form their character, to change their thought processes, to thinking like a criminal, to thinking like a responsible citizen, and to take responsibility for their actions, pay their debt, reform themselves, and come back into the community as returning citizens, not as returning criminals, returning gangbangers or thugs or drug addicts. No, but return as citizens and become responsible fathers, parents, and sons and daughters. These achievements are ongoing, and the benefits are going to continue to be derived in Allah, with Allah's help and with Allah's permission. We believe that we still have a potential for change in this society. A great movement that was initiated by Imam Deeen Muhammad was called QADIR, Committee for the Removal of All Images that Attempt to Portray the Divine. So he started this movement in 1977. He encouraged us to go to the churches in our neighborhoods, to write a letter to the ministers of Christian churches in our neighborhoods that were being populated by African Americans. And we would write a letter to the minister, and the letter was basic. It said, what would happen to the mind of a little white child if it sat in a church for 300 years, looking at the image of a black man as its God? And it asked that question. And then we also used the verses from Deuteronomy in the Bible that says, God said that you should make no image of God from anything in the heavens above or the earth below, that God shouldn't be portrayed in an image. You shouldn't put him in a racial image. And in the event of you putting God in a worship image of a particular race, you're burdening that race while you're also subjecting the people who are not of that race to a form of arrogance. So people begin to think that they're God, or they can do whatever they want to be, do to people who are not in that particular image. I remember we had an experience in San Francisco at a popular church called Third Baptist. And Third Baptist Church had a 25-foot image of Jesus Christ in a Caucasian image. And we wrote the letters and told them about they need to remove that image because it was doing psychological damage to our children and to the people worshiping that image. And eventually we had to picket that church. We actually walked around the church saying these images should come down. And we went inside the church, myself and a brother by the name of Salam Ali Sharif. And we went in the church and listened to the pastor, and he told his congregation, the Muslims are right. This image is not a true image of Jesus. And this image is not an image of God. He said this person who posed for this picture was the brother-in-law to Michelangelo, the person who painted the picture. And then eventually, to his credit, Dr. Reverend Amos Brown removed that image from their worship space. And I'm saying that to say that that's things like that happen all over the United States. And what was it addressing? The problem of racism. And Imam W.D. Muhammad also produced a song. He funded the song that was sang by Wali Ali, who sung a poem written by one of our sisters named Sabrine. I don't know the whole song by heart, but I'll give you a few bars. And that song said, this is addressing racism. It said, I sit in church, yet I don't understand why we pray to a Caucasian man. His hair is straight and his eyes are blue. Daddy, he doesn't look like you. Now I know why I feel so low. He looks like the slave masters of long ago. What are these images I see? What are they doing to me? If you do what your Bible say, you won't keep these images for another day. So you can find that song on YouTube. It's called Images. The singer, the performer is Wali Ali. And it's something that still is having a damaging effect in our community. Some people say white people have a God complex. They're thinking that they have certain privileges that they're entitled to based on their skin color. And they are also arrogant and abusive to some other people. We've been seeing this police violence for such a long period of time that we're almost numb to. You can see things all the time and you become desensitized to it. So the police brutality, we've been seeing people getting shot and things like that. And it seems like when we saw George Floyd with a person's knee on his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, it kind of, I'll say, dramatized the cruelty that we've experienced under this police abuse of authority. And when if you think that that's a small matter, kneel on the concrete on one of your knees for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, and you'll see how difficult that is for the person who's doing the act. Not even thinking about the person who is the recipient of abuse, just the person who's putting his knee on somebody with that kind of pressure for that period of time is a very difficult thing. So try that, and I think you'll understand how horrible act that was. And I believe we've kind of come to the end of our time. I want to ask Haroon if there are any questions. I will do my best to answer any questions that anyone has.
Brother, that was really nice, concept, but there are lots of to unpack of, and there is a guidance from Allah. Certainly, I want to show the book.
Yeah.
When we visit Imam Warisiddin Muhammad,
Yes.
he was in Chicago. He was talking about, there was a campaign on Clinton versus, Obama, and he was talking about some other things that in that time, Ramadan session, he talked the Bilalian concept.
Yes.
And one brother said that he is very, very, very big on Bilalian concept. And he made a joke. He said, everyone wants to be Khalid. Nobody wants to be a Bilal.
Right.
But the thing is, on our next speech series, inshallah, we want to go with this book,
Yeah.
Under the Light of Past, Present, and Future. And inshallah, I will invite you and Imam Deen Sharif, New Jersey,
Yeah.
because this book talks about, how can we benefit? He's not just, Bilal Habashi is not just, leader for our, Afro-American Muslims. He's also teacher for us too. They are
Yes.
Sahabis. They are the stars that we should strive to reach their, examples.
Yes.
And I think he will teach us lots of great things, how
And
to
there-
behave as a Muslim in future. Can you elaborate on Bilalian concept, that you
Yes.
mentioned,
Yes.
what he brought, why he thinks that this is important, Imam Warisiddin Muhammad, and how
Well-
you see is related to today's, society in the United States or any other matters.
Bilal ibn Rabah is reported that Muhammad the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that he had a dream and that he heard Bilal's footsteps in front of him going into paradise. And he questioned Bilal and asked him, what meritorious act do you do that you would be going into paradise in front of me? And Bilal, being a humble person, not an arrogant person, he said, I don't know anything that I do except every time I go to the masjid, I greet Atayatul Masjid. He makes 2 rak'ahs when he goes to the masjid every time when he goes. But also, some scholars have said that Bilal would come into the understanding of Islam before others. And as you know, it was the Africans who protected Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam before the Muslims were able to protect themselves. They made 2 hijras to Ethiopia under the Nagusa Sham. And Bilal was also a descendant of Ethiopia. He was born in the area because his population, when Abraham tried to destroy the Kaaba, and he took his army there to try to destroy the Kaaba, then the Africans from Ethiopia, who were a part of his army that was conquered, became the slaves after the pestilence, when the elephant refused to go and the birds dropped the stones on them and the people got sick. Well, some of those people got stranded there, and Bilal ibn Rabah was one of those people. It's also reported that Bilal was also a prince because he was from royalty in Ethiopia. So Bilal was not just a slave. He also came from noble parentage. Just like the enslaved Africans here in America who were snatched from the shores of Africa, we came from decent families. We came from a rich culture. We came from a rich civilization. West Africa, Mali Empire, the Songhai Empire, all of those things existed prior to us coming to being enslaved in the Americas. So Bilal's significance to us is very important for that reason. And also Bilal refused, after he became a Muslim, he refused to oppress another human being at the request of those who were enslaving him. He would rather accept punishment himself than oppress another human being. So if human beings can evolve to that level of compassion for their fellow human beings, then aspiring to be like Bilal is a great thing. So I'm very proud of my heritage as a Bilalian, as a person of African descent that was enslaved and then became a Muslim. So I'm very proud of that parallel in my life. And sometimes you can see if a person just like you can overcome great difficulties, that sometimes give you inspiration. Oh, if my friend John did that, I can do that. So we hope that more people will see how we've overcome the many of the pitfalls that exist in America because of the guidance of Islam and because of the benefit we receive when we apply Islam in our life, how it elevates us. You look at the life of Muhammad Ali. When he became a Muslim, he became courageous, and he, like Bilal, refused to oppress another human being. He refused to fight in the Vietnam War. He said he'd rather go to jail than fight against another person that had did nothing to him. And he said this government, this Firauni government, this government is like Pharaoh, was his enemy. He said, you're my oppressor. He said, they're not my oppressor. Those people have never done anything to me. And he took a moral stance. But it was not only him, all of the men in the Nation of Islam during that time, including Imam W.D. Muhammad. He also went to prison for not participating in the armed services and going to fight against oppressed people in different parts of the world. So that's a parallel. And it's also made Muhammad Ali a hero internationally because of the moral stance that he took, and because of the courageous stance that he took. He gave up making millions of dollars to take a moral stance where he was standing for justice. So Malcolm X, he was respected because he took a stand for justice. Imam W.D. Muhammad, he stood for justice. He took a stand for justice. That's why so many people who followed his father supported him, because they saw his sincerity, they saw his wisdom, and they fell in love with his love for the Quran and for the life of Prophet Muhammad. And he always challenges us to be decent men and women and to shake up the world, transform the world with Islam. And we're going to continue to work in that vein.
Thank you. Thank you. May Allah help us to be with him, inshallah, in heaven too. As Bilal, they are the stars of Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They are the students of Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Inshallah, we can be the student of them, especially in these challenging times. Time is, we don't have much time, but there are lots of things to add, unpack, in one way I can ask, how Imam Warisi Muhammad helped, those chaplaincy, Muslim chaplain concept in United States for prisons, hospitals, army. In another way, I can also, ask you to unpack business aspect of it, to entrepreneurship. But I would like to say, perhaps the most recent events, encourage me to ask, what would, do you think Imam Warisi Muhammad say to us during this injustice that, happened in the United States and sparked the protests? In many aspects, they are truthful, and some aspects there are riots. What do you think he will suggest us in this time? How can be a better Muslim that we are living in the United States and be benefit to society, on this, trialing and challenging times?
I think that Imam would encourage us to stand on the right side of moral issues of justice and issues of fairness. I'm well aware that he would stand on the side of right. However, the methodology that people employ, as you know, Imam Deputy Muhammad, it was a part of a coalition of people who worked against gun violence and gun manufacturing. He also stood with a coalition against pornography, and he stood with the oppressed indigenous people of Chiapas, Mexico, who were being persecuted by their government. He stood on the side of Palestinians and Palestinian rights. He stood on the side of the Afghani Mujahideen during their struggle against Russia when Russia invaded. So Imam Deputy Muhammad has always taken a stand on the side of poor and oppressed people. And additionally, he cautioned us not to be used by people who have hidden agendas. So when people riot and burn and do kind of things like that that are against keeping the civil society safe, we have to be cautious about that. And Imam cautioned us against following blind leaders. So we have a responsibility to lead with truth, to lead with reason, and also not to join with people of like minds. If the people's minds aren't in accord with the truth, you know, we are taught that we should enjoin what is right and forbid what is wrong. So if we are enjoining what is right and forbidding what is wrong, we know the difference. And in some cases with these recent events, we've seen what we would call provocateurs who are trying to discredit a legitimate appeal, a legitimate stand against outrageous conduct on the behalf of law enforcement. People have a right, according to the Constitution, to stand against those circumstances. We have a right to address grievances against our government. That's the First Amendment of the United States. Not only do we have the right for free speech, we have a right to address our grievances to the government, according to the Constitution. So Imam Deputy Muhammad was a supporter of the Constitution, and he was a supporter of citizens standing up for their legitimate rights and to call government officials to account when necessary. When the United States government, the federal court in Illinois took a great deal of property from the Muslim community in the probate court, because when his father died, he died intestate. He didn't have a will. So there were those who sued, saying that everything that the Muslim community in America had accumulated under Elijah Muhammad, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's leadership, was his personal property. We had a holding company for our business interests, for our farmlands, for our newspaper plant, for many of our businesses called progressive land development. And during this probate court, we lost 6,400 and something acres of land in Georgia. We lost land in Michigan, in Alabama, and I believe it was Mississippi. Imam Deputy Muhammad organized a protest in front of the federal court in I believe it was 85, or something like that. I might have been closer to 86. We remained in court, and they drained all of our resources. We lost the mosque on Stony Island. Minister Farrakhan was able to buy it after he got in trouble because of the probate court, prolonged probate court. And that mosque, by the way, is a smaller replica of Hagia Sophia in Istanbul. The Mariam Mosque, under the leadership of Minister Farrakhan, according to a Greek Orthodox church that owned it previously, that it's a smaller replica of Hagia Sophia there in Istanbul, Turkey. So Imam Deputy Muhammad would encourage us to be intelligent and sober-minded when facing critical situations such as what we are encountering today.
Thank you, Imam.
Thank you.
That was really nice explanation. There are lots of things to unpack. There is a Muslim scholar in here in the United States. He also said about Imam Waris Muhammad and his, movement as an antidote to racism, venom of racism. So he tried lots of things and he organized lots of things in positive aspect that we should follow those examples. Stand right, stand with the, those who oppress, but do not let the provocateurs, undermine the main concept and, eliminates your message. So we have to be very careful about it. And this is not short run, protesting in street is one way to, express your grievance, but this is long run. Racism still do exist and we have to make long run programs and, educate ourselves, inshallah. I would like to thank you that you give us valuable time for our program. Inshallah, I would like to see you, and hopefully our friends also agree with me that we would like to see you again, sometimes in near soon in other speeches. May Allah give blessings and barakah to your life, your health. Assalamu alaikum. Dear brothers and sisters, thank you. Dear brothers and sisters, we are at the end of our program. And hopefully we would like to see you on the first Friday of next month, inshallah, with the concept of Al-Habashi. We will have another Imam in New Jersey, DEEN Sharif, to talk about past and present and future concept of Al-Habashi. How can be exemplar for our patience and devotions as a teacher. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Abadan daiman.